power utility Eskom says that load shedding will continue to be suspended until further notice. I think it's just over a week, 8-9 days now that we haven't seen any load shedding. And Eskom has attributed the continued suspension to sustainable available generation capacity, sufficient energy reserves, and anticipated moderate demand for the week. Meanwhile, the not so good news is that Eskom's latest double-digit electricity price hike is now in effect. And this after the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, determined the increase in December last year. However, while Eskom's prices have gone up, municipalities will only increase their tariffs to customers on the 1st of July. But for more on the latest regarding Eskom and related matters, we joined here in studio by independent energy analyst Clyde Mallinson. Clyde, good to have you with us as always.
Good to be here again, Sakina.
So let's start with the fact that we haven't had load shedding for a number of days now. What's the reason behind that? Should we be excited or should we remain cautious?
It's actually very, very good news. It's fantastic. Of course, we've just come through the Easter weekend when everyone goes away, so that's not unexpected. If you look at the demand year to year, you always see a dip at Christmas and you see a dip at Easter in demand. So we've gone through a low demand period. And the coal fleet seems to be pulling itself together slowly. The key thing, though, is that we should use the opportunity while we don't have load shedding to actually put in place aggressive action plans to build new generation capacity so that we can actually use this opportunity or window, if it is a window, and let's hope it's a big window, to start getting in a position where we can retire the old, tired members of the coal fleet. They need to declutter, they need to retire. Some of them have worked for a long time. And we should use this opportunity not to celebrate that we don't have load shedding, but to use the opportunity to build new capacity so that when things start going wrong again, which they will, or when our economy grows, we will have electricity to drive that economic growth.
So Eskom telling us at the moment that they have adequate emergency reserves. And as you say, I wonder, are we at a point where these stations can be retired, one? And two, with regard to maintenance, is this not a good period to be ramping that up then?
Well, I think they have ramped up maintenance, and one of the arguments is that we had quite bad load shedding over the summer months because they had ramped up maintenance. But the other thing people shouldn't forget is that over the winter period, and we're moving into the winter period now, not quite, I would say May, they purposefully have less maintenance over winter so that more of the fleet is available because our demand is higher in winter. And so that's a normal thing to happen. So often in summer they might have as much as 8,000 megawatts down for maintenance. In winter they try and drop that down to about 3,000 megawatts. That's planned maintenance. Unplanned maintenance, of course, you can't plan it. So you can't say I'm planning for so much unplanned maintenance. That's an oxymoron.
And of course, the implementation of the Energy Action Plan, yes. That was also, of course, meant to alleviate the scourge of load shedding. So how are we faring on that?
I think that's bearing some fruit, but I still fear that we're not doing enough to build new generation capacity. The only way we can cover ourselves and start retiring those members of the coal fleet that are due for retirement is if we build the headroom of new capacity to make the space for the old to retire. I've often said if you're a traveling salesman, you can't get rid of your old car before you buy a new one, because then you can't be a traveling salesman.
Exactly.
So you buy your new car, save up for it, buy it, and then you say, right, now I can retire or sell or decommission my old car without it impacting on my ability to deliver. That's the secret.
So why aren't we moving faster and seeing quicker results on that front? Because it's been a number of years now. There have been a number of bid windows yes. Where we have commissioned some of these independent power yes. producers. So yes. why aren't we seeing the results?
It's just because we had a gap in the thing. we should have about 5 or so gigawatts of additional solar and about 3 gigawatts of additional wind. That should have been built already. But remember, it stalled. In 2015, they stopped the program, then it didn't start again, and there was a period of about 3 years where nothing was built. And then you've got to play catch up then. And we were putting in about 2-3 gigawatts a year under that program. And if you stall for 3 years, you're short of 9 gigawatts. And if you put 9 gigawatts back in now, we wouldn't have load shedding. And we wouldn't have had load shedding last year. So we're playing catch up all the time.
So how much energy are we getting from the independent power producers at the moment?
We're getting about, from an energy basis, I think it's about 6 or 7% of our total annual energy need.
How much should we be getting from them
well,
stage?
In terms of what they've installed, that's the exact correct amount. But I would like to see us getting, in Australia, for example, by 2030 they aim to be getting 80%, not from independent power producers, from renewable resources. So one needs to differentiate between independent power producers and renewable resources. And one of the saddest things is that, I say it's sad, Eskom has been prohibited from building its own renewable resources. Part of the condition of the Treasury bailout was that you're not allowed to use this money to build new generation resources. It's used to pay off your debt. That's the deal. Now, last year, Eskom spent 35 billion rand on diesel. Just 35 billion. Not 4 million. Small, 35 billion. Now, if Eskom had been allowed to build its own renewable resources, with 35 billion, it could have built enough solar to generate the same amount of energy in a year as what the 35 billion spent on diesel generated. So if they'd taken that money and built solar, and I'm not saying they could, because then you would have had more load, but if they had it would have generated as much electricity as was produced by the 35. And, of course, this year, it would have done the same. And next year, and the next year, for 25 years. So 1 year's worth of diesel expenditure would produce enough solar for Eskom, and Eskom could own it, to generate. And that's the sad thing. When you're playing catch-up, you're borrowing from loan sharks, as it were, to pay your debts. When you're playing catch-up, Eskom's playing catch-up the whole time. It's catch-up on its debt. Catch-up. So this latest increase, the 13% increase, the amount that 13% will bring into Eskom is just enough for it to pay another 35 billion for diesel.
So why is it that we tend to make everything seem like rocket science when there are obvious solutions to these problems?
Well, maybe you need to look at who's benefiting from the 35 billion of diesel sales. There might be some clues there. I don't want to enter into that space necessarily. But we know that Petro SA acts as an agent or a middleman, if you like, for diesel sales to Eskom. Eskom's not allowed to buy diesel direct from diesel suppliers. It buys it through Petro SA. And quite frankly, at the moment, the only thing keeping Petro SA afloat is the margin it makes on selling diesel to Eskom. So go figure.
So that's the one thing. The other thing is, of course, in that almost 13% increase, the impact on the consumer and the role that NERSA is meant to play in this regard.
Yes.
Because effectively, the consumer is paying for all the money that has been stolen from Eskom.
Yes.
You are paying for whatever is being given to Eskom, and you're still paying for electricity that you sometimes don't get.
Yes. Well, it's hard when you've got a utility that's run up a debt. I think Eskom's second biggest expense, it's getting close to being its biggest, is paying off its debt. The biggest expense is coal purchases. Then I think salaries and debt were sort of about equal. But I think they toggle with each other, if you know what I mean. If they get a bit of a debt bailout, then salaries. So yes, we are to a large extent having to increase our payments in order to cover the grift and corruption and the debt that Eskom has run up. And it's very sad, actually, that Medupi and Kusile have gone over budget and over time, because if that hadn't have happened, we would probably have been okay. You know, that was the plan. And so it impacts on everything.
So you've got the bid windows 1 to 6
Yes.
For the IPPs costing Eskom around 1.4 trillion rand.
No, that's not correct.
How much is it?
Well, when they pay for those, the original bid windows, they paid about R2.80 for solar, for example. On the last bid window, the solar prices were around about 50 cents. So if you aggregate it, if you take a weighted average, they're probably paying about R2.20 for renewable energy at the moment. They're paying R6 or R7 for diesel.
But if we take a combined look at how much Eskom has paid from the start.
Yes, well, it would probably be a large amount then.
Yeah.
But if you look at the combined amount they've paid for coal and for grift and corruption, it's a bigger amount.
No, but where I'm going with this,
Yes.
Clyde, is you look at how much they've paid for all
Yes.
of those bid windows.
Yes.
You look at how much they've paid with the cost overruns at Medupi and Kusile,
Yes, yes.
which is, of course, hundreds of billions again.
Yes, yes.
And you look at all the money that Eskom
Yes.
is spending, and still we do not have a stable electricity supply in this country.
I once did an analysis. I can't remember the exact figures. I worked out that there was about R1 trillion somewhere and somehow missing from Eskom, if you know what I mean. R1 trillion had kind of disappeared from Eskom over a period of about 15 years. And I'm not talking about it just disappeared one day. If you're talking about it. The cumulative effect of many of these things is that there's a mysterious R1 trillion that can't really, in my opinion, be properly accounted for.
The sad reality, though, is that it hasn't stopped.
No.
Whatever has been going on at Eskom that has led to all of this fruitless and wasteful expenditure hasn't stopped. I received a message from someone at Eskom alerting me to a situation at one of the power stations.
Yes.
And what is happening with emergency procurement.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
everything now seems to be bought on an emergency basis.
yes.
And that, of course, gives rise to all sorts of issues.
It's a free ticket. It's a
Exactly.
free ticket.
And again, here we're talking about a lot of money.
Yes.
Again, and this is one power station.
Yes.
One power station.
Yes.
And if we assume that this is happening at various power stations,
Yes. Yes.
nothing is improving, really.
Yeah. You see, it's a difficult situation because the people in Eskom, those that are left that aren't involved in some way with some form of and there's lots, I mean, I would say the majority, they're sitting with having to plan for the future, to build the infrastructure grid, to build the transmission grid. And they're saying, we don't seem to have enough money. We need our tariffs to be cost reflective, to enable us to put in the investment to build new grid and transmission. And they're sitting there saying that, and you say that's fair. But we sitting as the customers and the population saying, hey, but we're paying for corruption and ineptitude.
We're not seeing
there's
the benefit.
There's a disconnect there. There's a definite disconnect where the hardworking people in Eskom are trying to fix it, but they're not necessarily getting that money. Some of that money you're talking about from one of the power stations, I bet it's not going to fixing the maintenance on the power station. It's probably gone to an emergency heavy fuel oil purchase or something.
Well, I'm going to look at this
Yes.
and I'm going to
Yes.
work on it because it's
Yes.
quite startling revelations. And
Yes.
as I say, it is at one power station.
Yes.
So just a quick one before we end this, Clyde. So what is the outlook for this winter season?
Well, I think it's going to be improved over last winter. I'm hoping so, and it's partly because we've put a lot of solar in. People have put rooftop solar in, and we're generating about 4 gigawatts of rooftop solar, which helps us obviously during the daytime. It doesn't help at night, but we use more electricity at daytime. But I just want to end from my side by saying I used to talk about 10 million households in South Africa living in energy poverty. This is before the electricity increase. I was remembered recently that speaking to Dr. Tracy Ledger at the Public Affairs Research, it's 11 million households now. It's not 10 anymore that live in energy poverty. And with this latest increase in electricity prices, I wouldn't be surprised if we're heading for 12 million homes. And those 10 that are often referred to are in energy poverty. When the price of electricity goes up, what are you then in energy poverty squared, if you know what I mean? It just is exacerbated, and you reach a point where you simply can't pay for it anymore. And then the temptation to defect becomes survival.
And that, unfortunately, is our reality. Clyde Mallinson, thanks so much for coming through, independent energy analyst, unpacking some of the latest developments around Eskom, and, of course, also giving us a bit of a prognosis for what we can expect this coming winter.